Hello, fellow rebels and game developers. We have Marcel
Hello.
and I'm Daniela for our monthly Rebel Toolbox and Rebel Engine get together. I know there are news on Marcel's side, so I will be handing over straight to him. From my side, we now have the donate button, so you can either join us on Patreon as a monthly member, or you can donate to us on a one-off basis if that's what you choose to do, in order to keep our project going and fund what will be the best FOSS game engine there is.
Sounds
And
good. Thank you.
yeah, and with that, over to Marcel.
I think today I want to just focus on one topic, which is the translations, just to keep the focus on one thing. We can discuss the others next time. So for those that have been watching the pull requests, on the Rebel documentation side, we have now got the setup ready for the translations. So there are no translations as of now, but we can now build Rebel documentation for any official language, as long as there are translation files. Now, the decision going forward is that any translation that is at least 60% complete, which is, I think, a generous level, will be eligible for inclusion within the Rebel documentation. So at the moment, to get a 6% for the Rebel documentation, we need both the Rebel Engine API, which is included in the documentation, as well as the Rebel documentation for the toolbox itself, which is hosted on the Rebel documentation repository, to be at a 60% complete. Now, we are able to use the previous Rebel Engine that we've used before to use the translations that are there, so that we have got a lot of translations that are ready to go. They just need to be updated for Rebel itself. But at this point in time, the infrastructure and the tools and the scripts and the make files and everything that's used to update the translations has been added and committed to the existing environment. So for that to happen, I've obviously been testing with a couple of languages. The two that I've been working with are Spanish, which is basically 90% complete from the translations that we've got, as well as the simplified Chinese, which is also around the 95% complete. Two different languages, two different requirements, and they've highlighted a number of challenges which we've now overcome with converting specifically the Rebel Engine API into the documentation format so that we can publish it in an automatic way. So the translations themselves in the Rebel Engine API rely on the Rebel editor, the tools to be able to translate those documents into both the online as well as the inside the engine translations. And then we use those translations to create files for the HTML that is then hosted by read the docs that we have the documentation on at the moment. So the current default English language will have options that you should be able to then choose the Spanish or Chinese, simplified Chinese translations. And we've run through the builds, and we've made sure that all the warnings have been addressed. So a lot of warnings about links that were out of date and things like that within translations have been addressed. So a lot of work has been done to get the translations ready. So at this point in time, we have the translations build tools for the Rebel documentation committed and ready to go. And then on the Rebel Engine side, we currently have Rebel Engine API translations, which are being hosted by Weblate. Now, we want to get all our translations onto Weblate. So that includes the Rebel Engine API, which is there ready, as well as the Rebel Editor translations, as well as the Rebel documentation translations. So there's components that need to be added. But to achieve this, we have restrictions on the free hosting that we have with Weblate, which requires us to reduce the number of what they call strings, in other words, the actual texts that are being translated, to within a level that means that we can't currently put all the translations we've got onto Weblate. So we need to reduce the Rebel Engine API. So again, using the 60% rule, we're going to reduce the number of translations that are on the Rebel Engine API that are hosted on Weblate to be the languages that are at 60%. And that should allow us to then add the components for the Rebel editor and the Rebel documentation toolbox. So once those two components have then been added, we should be able to add the translations again, because there doesn't seem to be any restriction on the number of translations we have, as long as at the time you want to add a component, they are under a certain level. So I'm going to reduce the number of strings so that we should be able to add the components and then re-add the translations going forward again. So that's a bit of a workaround to try and get things working on Weblate properly. To be honest, I've not 100% sure it will work. So there is a risk that we can't restore the translations that we've got. But having not received anything from anybody to say otherwise, that there is a different way or better approach, I think this is the way forward, and this is what we should do going forward. If it doesn't work, it's not going to work, is the short answer. So either this works or it doesn't work. If it doesn't work, then we need to find another way to host translations, either do it ourselves or find another solution. But I think the Weblate solution is the best solution going forward, and it's very popular amongst translators themselves, people who work on it. And we've had a number of people translating the Rebel Engine API for us on Weblate. So I would like to continue using it, and this is what we need to do to try and get it to work with all the modules or the components, as Weblate calls them, within the translations. So I'm going to be making a number of changes to make that happen, little commits that will go through. Hopefully, Daniela, you'll be around and available to look and approve and ask any of your incising questions that you come up with sometimes for the commits. But that would be good if we could then work together on that. So I'll be talking to you offline and making sure that we can get those changes in. And hopefully we will then have the three components with all the translations up and running on Weblate, with automatic updates, with all the scripts running to update them, so that when changes are made on Weblate, they come back to Rebel Engine and Rebel documentation. And when changes are made on Rebel documentation or Rebel Engine, that they get uploaded to Weblate itself. So that those scripts work already with the Rebel Engine API side of things, as you've probably seen with translations coming back and forth. But hopefully we can then get that for the other components as well in the next couple of weeks, shall we say. So hopefully before the next community meeting, that should all be done and dusted, and we will have some excellent news at the next community meeting. So I don't know if you've got any questions or concerns or things you want to raise now before we discuss it offline.
I don't. If anyone out there has any issues, then do get in touch with us. As always, you're more than welcome to join us and help us and make it the best FOSS game engine there is.
Yeah, I mean, it's really, we want to make it as easy as possible for translators to contribute. One of the things that is interesting with the changes that have been making is that with the changes that are made on Weblate, they are any translators are automatically added as contributors to Rebel Engine, which is nice. And if they're making translations to the documentation, they'll automatically be added as contributors to Rebel documentation. So translators will be recognized as fully fledged contributors, which is not the case with some other projects where translators are kept as separate class citizens and only coders are added as contributors. We recognize all contributors, whether they're contributing art or whether they're contributing translations or code or whatever it might be, that they are or documentation, that they are recognized as contributors in their own right, which allows us to work around the manual list that currently exists in some of the translation files with names and email addresses of the translators that have contributed to it. So what I want to do is remove those lists, which of course creates all sorts of identity issues when they're sitting there with the name and email address just in files that are stored in the public repositories, and they will then be listed as contributors within GitHub. So whatever your user handle in GitHub is the what you will see. You won't see your email address, which is what seems to have been going on in the past. So we'll be able to clean that up so that nobody will have their email address published just because they've added a translation. So that will be cleaned up. And also because it's a manual list, it needs to be added. People are added manually, because WebLate itself doesn't do it. So it's a bit of an archaic system. And I understand why it's there. People want to be recognized for their contributions, but at least on GitHub, if you make a contribution via WebLate or within Rebel Engine or the Rebel documentation itself, you get assigned that contribution. So you will be recognized as a contributor, and we won't have this manual list, including email addresses, which I don't think is the right thing going forward. So those lists will be removed, as well as just some cleaning up of copyright files so that the copyrights align with the dates that the translations were actually started. So, if the first time a person contributes to a particular language, that is the date that the copyright runs from, as should be the case. So the first time a document is created is when we have a copyright date stamp on it. And we just clean up the copyright associated with that. And that just allows us also to keep within the copyright regulations that people recognize for their contributions as a copyright by default, as well as little things like the project name and that we've worked with, since that it's called the Rebel Engine API, not the class reference, for example, things like that. So little changes that have happened over time within the documentation will be applied to the translations as well. So, like I said, a lot of work has been done on the translations. The shell, should we put it that way, to get going for the translations is now in place. And now we just need to make the changes on WebLate, incorporate those changes into WebLate, sync that all again with documentation and the Rebel engine itself. And then we can add as many languages as people want. If people want their language and it's not currently included, then we should be able to include that as well. So looking forward to that. It should be nice to finally get that off my to-do list. It's been sitting there for probably over a year now to get that sorted out. But yeah, that should be good.
I've just lost your camera, but I still can hear you. Just
you can still hear me though?
Yes, I can.
Okay, sorry. No, but that's it. So I'm really excited that that's nearly done, and looking forward to sharing the successful completion at the next community meeting.
Yes, I'm looking very much forward to it as well. And for everyone listening, what is the next topic you would like to have addressed? Anything that you would like to see with Rebel Toolbox, or any of the individual tools such as Rebel Engine? What's your favorite thing that you would like to see improved? Do let us know.
Exactly. Priorities. That's a key thing. We've got a long list, but it'd be nice to know what people's priorities are.
Yes. That's all from me.
Yeah, I think let's keep that focus on the translations, because I want to work with you and making sure that happens over the next week or two, and that should be good. So let's keep it at that, and then hopefully people come up with some priorities for the next community meeting that we can then discuss and agree upon going forward. Exactly.
And with that, join us for the next community meeting. It is the second Tuesday in August. And yes, I'm going to look forward to meeting you in person, or on the call, better said. And with that, bye-bye.
Bye.